All right. Well, fantastic. I think I've done this properly. Welcome, everybody. I am not the technical producer behind the system, but I'm stepping in today. We have some travel complications, which some other folks have had some travel complications in the past couple of weeks. But we're going to have a great conversation today as we let people enter. Welcome to the Converged User Group June Community Hour. My name is David Giesica. I run the Converged User Group program for Dell Technologies. I also sit on the board. I am joined today with two fantastic guests. Our special guest, Simon Bennett, CTO for Rackspace in EMEA, and board member Adam Little, cybersecurity lead from New Belgium Brewing. He is co-hosting with me. Gentlemen, thank you very much for attending. Give me a thumbs up if you can hear me well. Otherwise, people have just been watching my mouth move. We got you? All right, fantastic. And let's see here. We got some people coming in, still coming in. Chris Stanley, I see you out there. Chris Stanley is in the UK with you as well, Simon. He is in Wales, and he is another board member at Loop Up Technology or Loop Up Communications.
Fantastic. Well, I'm not a million miles from Wales. I'm in the West Country of England near Cheltenham.
Fantastic. All right, before we get started, there's just some boilerplate I have to get out of the way. So welcome, everybody. And I'll start by thanking our fantastic sponsors, Dell Technologies, VMware, and Intel for making this possible. Thank you for taking time to dial in with us today. Looks like it's a great summertime up here in the Northeast. And I hope it's a great summertime kickoff wherever you are. If you're not familiar with the Converged User Group, we're a community focused on connecting users and prospects of Dell CI and HCI solutions. We do this in a variety of different ways, including virtual, like this community hour, VR, if you've attended those, it's kind of a short commute to a near in-person experience. And just this year, we brought back in-person events like Dell Technologies World, and we'll have another in-person event coming in San Francisco at the end of August, as well as, fingers crossed, Barcelona in November. We bring folks together to share best practices and lessons learned. We're going to grab some of those from Simon and Adam today, and we're going to have a great conversation. We love to get you involved, so please use the Q&A function, use the chat function, shoot in questions, shoot in topics. We don't want this to be a one-way conversation. We want to be engaged with you. So please use the tools that are available. And lastly, we want to make sure that we're delivering what you need and always improving. So we're going to put a survey link into the chat, as well as send you an email afterwards to let you know about the survey and upcoming events. We really do appreciate your time taking to provide us feedback, and we need to know what you want to hear about. So let us know. Thank you very much, and we will get started. Adam, Simon, thanks again for joining us. Simon, to kick it off, please introduce yourself to the members, provide a little bit of background for those who might not know what Rackspace does or all the things that Rackspace can do, and a little bit about yourself, please.
No problem at all. Thank you, David. And hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon. Possibly good evening, depending on where you're from. My name, as David said, is Simon Bennett. I'm the CTO for Rackspace in the EMEA region. That covers from obviously Ireland right over to the Middle East. And I've got architects and technical staff that work across the entire region. I've been at Rackspace 2 years now, and I joined from IBM, where I undertook a variety of roles, but I won't dwell on my past life. What I would say about Rackspace, for those that don't know, the company's been around for around 22 years. And despite the name Rackspace, and our origins, which were literally space in a rack, and that's really hence the name. And we used to provide that sort of service for people, which was really an enhanced colo. We progressed through providing sort of managed services within those racks. As a company, alongside NASA, we actually invented OpenStack. So if you go back into the 2000s, we were with one of the inventors of the OpenStack technology. Obviously now that's moved on, and as a company at that time, we had ambitions to be a public cloud provider. as history, looking back now, overtook us somewhat. That small company called Amazon seemed to steal a march on us, to be honest, and grew far more spectacularly and had far better investment based on the book, what was the bookstore and the logistics. So, you know, that's ancient history now. And where we moved on to is providing private VMware type solutions for customers, both single and now multi-tenant within our data centers and within customer data centers, but also being a sort of managed service provider on top of all three hyperscalers. So we provide cloud services to migrate customers, be it, you know, VMware type moves, moving customers' VMware workloads on the VMs on each of the hyperscaler, image migrations, but also much more now, cloud native development, serverless, Kubernetes, and other elements like that. We will help transform customers, and we can provide the managed services for them as well. So really, we've sort of broadened out into much more of a services proposition. Still not forgetting the product, not forgetting the likes of, you know, Dell, VxRail, VMware on top, running the private cloud, because we've got many thousands of customers that still use and love that technology. David, I hope that gives everyone a brief flavor.
That's a great flavor. Adam, any questions to ask or follow on with that?
Yeah, I was going to say, can you maybe elaborate a little bit on just the different Dell solutions that you guys are leveraging and how you're extending that to customers? And, you know, what has that evolution been like for your team internally, right? For internal services and, you know, kind of testing a new evolution to hyper-converged and how you're leveraging VCF, stuff like that.
Okay, Adam, thank you. Well, when we started doing a lot of the internal systems, to be honest, they weren't initially on Dell, we were HPE. But what we realized by working with Dell is that, yeah, with the various technologies, and I'm talking previous to VxRail, for example, is that the Dell family of products, and especially with the EMC connection, gave us a really interesting set of broad technologies that we could use, not only for internal systems, but also for customer situations, be it initially things like what we called managed virt, which was a, you know, managed virtualization platform for customers to use. Over time, obviously, as newer technology came out, for us, rather than having separate systems running, you know, the switches, the SAN devices, the storage, the servers, the VxRail and that sort of hyper-converged type environment became a much more attractive proposition, not only physically to deploy in a data center, but also to manage from a management point of view, because the integration was there, which we would do historically manually. And as our older equipment, you know, first round replacement of HPE with Dell, when we put traditional servers in to replace traditional servers, but now more hyper-converged is available, it makes perfect sense for us in the main to go down that route. Cost of ownership, flexibility in terms of deployment, and ease of deployment as well has improved dramatically.
So Simon, you're using VxRail and VCF on VxRail, not only to provide the solutions to your customers, but also for your business infrastructure. Is that correct?
Yes, it is. We use it for both. We've got that much confidence in it. We don't see a need to do that. As I said, as we transitioned, we moved a lot of the internal systems onto Dell. And now, you know, as we replace stuff, we replaced it with VxRail. We use that for internally and absolutely externally, because it means we can provide some very neat solutions for customers, not only with the VCF, but with, you know, VMware Cloud Director sat on top, which enables things like self-service these days, which customers really want and appreciate. They don't want to wait days or weeks for a change request. Customers would like to do the work themselves. They can do it when they want at their convenience, spin things up, spin them down, change the sizes, and use the technology as we intended. And, you know, sitting that on top of the VxRail platform, it's an ideal combination.
And Adam, are you guys doing self-service at New Belgium?
We're not yet, but it's definitely something we have talked about. You know, we go through those little development sprints or QA checkouts or tests for major revisions, ERP upgrades, stuff like that. But yeah, I think that's where we all want to be, right? To Simon's point, right, as a provider, it seems great to offer that flexibility of, we can give you that cloud agility, cloud-like agility, but also have that fine tuning of if you want to deploy your own, how you want to spin it up, how you want to spin it down. So I think that's a pretty interesting proposition there of how you can kind of get the best of both worlds, right? Of that cloud-like design, but also still that approach of on premise and controlling your own hardware. As a sidebar, Simon, do you ever get pushback from your customers of like, oh, I'm not sure my workload can run on hyper-converged, and then you have to have that conversation of, hey, we're running all of our stuff on hyper-converged and the performance is where you expect it to be? Just interesting if you run across that.
Yes, quite often, but often, so the answer often is to benchmark their workload.
Yeah.
Obviously, trying to benchmark it actually it's more of an art than a science quite often, because to actually build benchmarking harnesses is quite expensive and takes a long time. But what you can often do is pick a particular workload a customer has. It might be a batch job attached to a database, heavy IO. But if you can take that and proof of concept it, run it and show them, demonstrate it, it's easy to convince the skeptics that way. And also, I think when you get the engineers and a customer want to look over something, when they start to unpick it a little bit and understand how it actually works, a lot of that skepticism goes away.
Yeah, it's a similar approach on our end. We have a couple of folks that were just hesitant for that infrastructure, right? They've always been used to the old 3-tier architecture, and kind of for us, it was, get it deployed and let them, test it and run stuff against it and see how their workloads work on it. I just wonder that for me, I feel like as a provider, it must be tough to have that conversation with a customer over and over again of, hey,
it's not, it's funny enough, it's not, because if you think about, if I turn the problem around a little bit, if you were going to start a journey to public cloud now and you're used to running your own infrastructure, what's the first thing you end up having to let go of control of? You've no idea what hardware really your cloud is running on. So when I talk to customers, especially CIOs, they go, well, I'm losing control. I'm saying, well, your other department is on public cloud, has completely given up control altogether.
Yeah, that's fair.
And actually, you've been very happy to do that. So actually, if you look to us running private cloud, we allow you still to peer into the internals. So actually, you've got a greater level of visibility of what you do with us than you would if you give it away to a public cloud provider. And that's not being cynical about a public cloud. It's just real life. And you need to educate people that actually they're already ceding that level of control anyway.
That's an extremely good point. Yeah.
Before we get, I do want to get to multi-cloud, but Simon, you mentioned some things, and I think Adam, you shared that like many members, you're not quite on that fully automation journey yet. You haven't gotten to self-service, but I talk to a lot of folks who are they're somewhere on that spectrum. Either they want to get there, or a few folks are really well into it, but a lot of folks are somewhere in between and maybe more towards the beginning side. Without, Simon, clearly you guys are doing all sorts of your own proprietary stuff to make this easy, and it's your business to be able to enable this self-service. But if we zoom out a little bit, what lessons learned or best practices for setting up the private cloud could you share with members who are either or somewhere on that journey?
Yes, and I'll start with something that's an amusing tale that I often tell, is that if you think about automation, the first thing you should look to do is make sure your individual processes, be it Terraform scripts, Chef or Puppet or whatever you use, are absolutely rock solid. Because otherwise, all that automation does is it enables you to fail faster. Because if they don't work well, you'll just find that you get yourself into a world of pain. And when you fail, you're probably midway through an automation process. And the first thing you've then got to do is unpick what's gone wrong. And that's very hard. So what I always say to people, if you're developing it yourselves or we're enhancing what we do, you've got to make sure individual element is well documented, well written, well tested, and that your back out or breakout procedures are absolutely rock solid as well. Because if you really aren't confident, or you've got things that go wrong, it's really hard to unwind, and you get things into a sort of disintermediated state, and that can take 20 times as long as the automation you've written to unpick, especially when you're maybe deploying maybe 500 600 VMs, loads of LUNs, adding other features like IP ranges or IPAM and so on. If all that stuff starts to go a bit awry, how do you catch it up and get to a known good state again? So I would rather have some manual processes and not automate everything if it enables me to see a good known state at each step through. And I would always recommend you break your automation chains up into small and more granular chunks, so you can stop at a known good point and then start another bunch of automation before you're ready to automate an entire set of processes.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like great. You don't want to replicate something that's broken.
Or even something that is a little bit flaky. It's not necessarily broken, but if it fails 1 in 10 times, never automate it at that point.
Yeah.
Okay. And yeah, I can only imagine the world of hurt that will create.
Yeah. Deploying a couple hundred VMs and they're all messed up. Yeah.
I can replicate this almost.
Yeah.
Exactly. And
I don't know why it keeps happening, but it does. 1 in 10 or 1 in, yeah, man. Well, good words, pieces of advice. Let me ask, if I step back a little bit, with your move to VCF and VxRail and your legacy data equipment, I would love it if all of your stuff was from Dell and basically all of it was VxRail. But I know that's not the case, and that's certainly not the case with members too. Everybody's got, unless you're starting a brand new greenfield company, you have some brownfield and you have to move things around. What is VxRail enabling you to do or to leverage more of your legacy equipment versus before you enabled VxRail?
I think a number of things, and I think by standardizing upon Dell equipment, one of the things that we've been able to do is mix and match. We've mixed and matched the old with the new, with separate storage devices, as well as the hyper-converged with reuse of older devices. It extends their shelf life. So I think what it gives you is a blend of things as you progress, and you don't have to just throw out the old to inherit the new. The two things can coexist. You can retain your separate standalone storage devices and then plug them into that environment, which eases transition. It supports things like if you've got customers that have maybe been running backups on an old solution for years and you need to move the new solution, I'm not going to copy all those backups to a new solution, but I need access to it on a storage array or a data domain or whatever it may be, because I need still to be able to restore those annual mandated backups. So being able to interconnect old world and new world is absolutely essential to avoid it being a massive engineering burden, but also a massive cost burden to completely transform something I don't need to do. And I think the combination of allowing those components to coexist, if you will, for an organization of our scale is a godsend.
Yeah, and we were talking earlier about the VxRail dynamic nodes and how that's enabling this to be even smoother for you. Can you talk to that a little?
Yeah, well, I mean, dynamic nodes for me give us a different option in terms of connectivity out to especially out to the storage world and what we do there, and allow us to maybe use different features of the storage, replication, other things that we use, or snapshotting. So take other advantages of storage, give us more flexibility in the individual nodes rather than preset fixed node sizes. So I think the dynamic nodes give us just another tool in the toolkit, if you will. And I think having the option of using them where it's appropriate, and the standardization is really important, because if you're going to automate, the more standard things are, the easier it is to automate and then maintain that automation. Otherwise, what you end up with is what I'd almost describe as a cottage industry, dealing with different types of devices all the time that have different attributes. By standardizing on a few, as you say, dynamic nodes, non-dynamic nodes, you know what they do. You can write a bunch of scripts to do some automation, plug it into Dell's own toolkit and just use it. You haven't got to worry well, this one's a variant X or a Y or a Z. It just gives you that almost sense of control.
As you adopt this, or as you manage the team to adopt this, how have you managed? Has it been a change management? Has it been, can you share maybe some thoughts on, I guess I'll step back. So that's how you're doing it. The world is moving towards multi-cloud, and you're facilitating multi-cloud with customers. I'd like to get the conversation around, multi-cloud, and are you seeing trends with customers, but also are you seeing when you introduce this, do people need to change the way they're organized, and do they need to change culture in order to fully enable what multi-cloud can deliver?
Oh, 100%. I mean, if you think about what happens with multi-cloud or what happens in cloud in general, all of a sudden now you've got the business driving IT more than they ever have before. The reason for that, first and foremost, was business always thinks the IT shop is too slow. No matter what you do, the IT shop is slow. Therefore, it's almost the enemy of business, or has been in the past. And then what happened was businesses went straight to the hyperscalers or SaaS providers, got their credit card out and bought some cloud. Now, that worked for a while, but suddenly you need data out of the IT shop. So suddenly the business need IT again, and it changes their dynamic. And what business need to do and have had to do is they've had to learn a little bit of the language of IT. But it's also really important for IT now to much more learn the language of business. Because if the business can go and order from a cloud provider in their language, you need to make sure that all three parties are talking the same language and you don't misinterpret each other, because there lies a lot of mistakes and errors just because you misconstrue what you've asked for. And then it sort of leads into, when you get together culturally, is suddenly, even though the business have ordered a service from the cloud, who worries about the security when you move the data, when you connect the things together? Well, actually, the IT department becomes ever more important, and the bit that becomes most important in all that is networking and security, because you're nothing in the cloud without networking, because you can't access it, certainly internal staff or even customers. And if you need data out of your old data center or a private cloud, you need networking between those two elements, and you need to understand the cost of that with data egress charges, for example. But more importantly, how do you layer security on so that all of it's secure, not just the individual components? Because you've got security is multi-layered, as most people know. You're not just talking about antivirus, you're not just talking about firewalls, you're talking about, threat intelligence, denial of service, weak points within that infrastructure. All of that stuff suddenly becomes important, and you can't just have the business buying a SaaS service and plug in a bunch of things in there without security. That's a long-winded answer, David, but it's quite a transition for a company to go through that. And what you need to do is bring the whole company with you. If you're on a cloud journey, it's a top-down decision that I'm going all in on cloud, for example. You can't do it bottom up, because it goes wrong. If everyone's bought into it and you get everyone involved in the decisions around it, things like testing, things like integration, and people know what they're in for, then I think you're much more likely to massively increases your chance of success. If you do it just as a technology play, you'll often disappoint the business because you're not solving business problems. And if you do it just as a business play, you often risk the business where data is the most precious asset.
With that in mind, do you have some key best practices that you like when you can stop customers and say, okay, here's how you think about it? What are some best practices to either reorg so that everyone's talking together or learning the same language, or learning the language that they should be learning, or maybe getting the IT folks better exposed to the business needs so that they can get ahead of where the business might get to? Do you have thoughts around that? Or Adam, please jump in too.
I was going to say, David, is this the point where I say hire Rackspace? That's probably not the right answer, but in all seriousness, yes, I would. The best description I can do is, if you think about it like building a house, you have to know what you're going to build before you build the foundations. So if you know you're going to build a 1-story bungalow, your foundations don't need to be very deep. If you're going to build a 6-story, monster of a house, then your foundations need to be very, very different. And I liken the journey to cloud and the organization to that, is you need to know what you're going to build. Each player in that needs to know what they want to build, so that you get all those requirements from each department, everyone involved, and you get everyone together to know, this is what I'm building, this is the consequence of that. Once the foundations are right, building the rooms are probably the function of the IT department and architects, but how you furnish all those rooms with what you're going to do are the applications and the other bits, and that's the individual departments, and ultimately the doors are the interfaces between the applications and services. It's quite a weird analogy, but for me, when I'm explaining to non-technical people, the idea of a house and how it works is very like that journey to cloud, especially multi-cloud, where different rooms can be different clouds, private, public, data center, or whatever. And it helps. So I just find it's an easy way for companies that aren't used to it to try and think about the problem in a different manner.
Yeah, I follow the analogy. Adam, go ahead.
I was just going to say, to add to that, can you maybe talk about, because I feel like we have some folks that are, back to what David was saying, right, with self-service and automation, like we all want to automate what we can, but I think there's definitely this like, similar to how a couple of years ago, everybody was like, cloud, we got to do cloud. Somebody in SkyWest magazine read cloud, and that's what bottom top down, right? We have to do cloud. Why aren't we in the cloud? Where I think DevOps is like now the next thing that everyone's talking about, and it's infrastructure as a code. I think is super helpful, understanding Terraform and Ansible and stuff like that. But there is also this subset, right, kind of the evolution of adopting hyperconverged, right? There's some resistance amongst engineers and stuff like that. The same thing here, right, with infrastructure as a code and DevOps. There are people that are getting into it that know how to do the coding, and then there are people that are in it that know how to do the infrastructure. And how do you bridge that gap, right? How do you get those people to learn and accept those things and embrace that stuff? And there are many engineers that are like, I don't want to be doing code for infrastructure, right? And it's hard to not say, hey, look, here are all the benefits, right? Here are the other things you can work on. But I just figured at your scale, you'd probably be able to answer this question well on how you pull staffing along and reorganize them for that new approach, right? That's more scalable.
Okay, I'll certainly give it a go, Adam. I think the way I look at it, first and foremost, if you're going to automate, all your sysadmins will no longer have a job. So, and you say to your sysadmins, well, look, I can give you a much more interesting role being, like a site reliability engineer, or I can give you, you can develop scripts and processes that will, eventually automate yourself out of a job. But once you've got that skill, you can put that skill to good use all over the place. You can help line of business code if you're interested in. You can help look at more, maybe machine learning or artificial intelligence, which is an individual boosts your own career, boosts your own CV. Because ultimately, if you don't automate what you do to start with, you're just going to sit there and be automated out of existence. And that's a really harsh statement to start with. But when people start to realize that, almost everything is getting automated, and you can start and look at the analogy of things like car production lines and other bits and pieces where, they're built by robots now. They're very rarely built much by people. That the traditional jobs in IT are being changed through automation. And actually, once you get into the idea of that and working in teams, because the big thing about doing automation projects or journey to cloud is you actually get to collaborate with a lot of different people. And people generally, in the main, like working with other people, like working with collaborating, like working together. And actually that sort of collegiate nature of the development of those underpinnings, if you will, actually, when people get into it, they get quite enthused about it. And we really look to do things like reward success, frequently, deliver frequently and reward success, celebrate that success. And people see that what they do has value. Often sysadmins, apart from, if you look at sysadmins, really when they get noticed is actually when they fix something that's gone wrong. 90% of the time when it all works, no one notices them, no one does anything. The heroic computing model then applies when they fix something horrendous. Actually, what you want to celebrate them is with them avoiding that. Celebrate zero defects, celebrate the fact that a task that took 3 weeks now takes 3 hours. And you need to really celebrate what your co-workers achieve in that sense. And that's a corporate and a cultural thing as much as anything. And the more you do that, you bring people along with you, because people like to be involved in a bit of peer recognition, some awards for some innovative ideas and so on. And that brings our development and engineering community absolutely together. In Rackspace, I help run what we call Tech Talks once a month. And we get our best technical people to present to a community of 700 engineers. Every month, 3 or 4 people present something. And that presentation is about engineering excellence, which is moving away from admin and delivering something that saved time, saved cost, improved customer quality. And we celebrate that every month with an award for a couple of people. And that really does foster that creative talent, because actually most techies are also quite competitive. And that you're not being cynical about it, but when you've got them motivated to do that, they will push each other. Does that sort of step into that problem a little bit, Adam?
Yeah, that's super helpful. I think it's just one of those things that's come up for a lot of folks, right? And I think it's good to get the insight from someone that's been through it of here are some ways to do that. It's interesting, like you said, right? Because there are just some folks that are super all about it, that are very competitive and want to know those things. And there are some organizations where, like you said, it's like, all right, we're going to have to figure out where we're going to get you to line up somewhere else, because this, it'll be a matter of time before we won't need you to do these things. That's where we all want to be, is in that more, speed to delivery, right? And, keeping up with the business and not being, anything that's slowing them down.
Absolutely. And I think I've personally found peer pressure works much better than a diktat from above.
Yeah.
Yep.
And also you can, the other thing we've sometimes done is pitch different teams, engineering teams against each other to solve a problem.
There you go.
And that gets really interesting, because they will find a different way to solve the same problem. And people who are often reluctant are the ones that often have the best ideas. They're just often maybe, frightened to put their hand up. But if they work in a group with their peers, they'll talk to the peer about the idea and it will get exposed.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great learning points. Great,
Advice, yeah.
great perspectives. I am interrupting a little bit because I've been scanning the Q&A. We have a couple questions out here. I think I'll start with Rodney because he came in first. So we'll do it this way. He wants to know if you've got customers running their SAP environments on HCI. And he shares that it's been difficult to convince many that HCI can successfully run on, or I think what he means is that SAP can successfully run on an HCI platform.
Yes, it can. I think that's the super short answer, which I think that's unfair just to do that. But yes, it can. But often what you need to do is you need to work with SAP, especially, and benchmark these things. Yeah, you can work with SAP. They've got reference points for hyperconverged for running SAP, especially things like SAP HANA, how you do that. So you can do it. You need to be wary of what you're getting yourself into, and make sure that you're looking at the balanced configuration that HCI can provide. But absolutely, things like SAP can run. We have some customers running on SAP, on HCI. But also, if you think about it from a public cloud point of view, SAP now heartily endorse running SAP HANA, especially on various of the hyperscalers, when all that hardware is completely abstracted and you don't know really what's running on at all underneath it. So SAP themselves have had to relax the rules when they used to be very picky about the SAP reference architecture, and you specify things down to the nth degree. But now, they're a bit more liberal around that, and it does work, and it does work successfully. There are some very extreme use cases where HCI doesn't deliver, but I would suspect that's the top 5% of the customers only, because they have very extreme IOPS requirements, for example, where HCI doesn't quite crack it. But I would suggest for most of the workloads, it's really not a problem.
Yeah, I was going to say, I feel like most of the time it's generally a vendor that's concerned about the performance level of the HCI environment.
There's also a little thing that non-HCI vendors put that FUD around.
Right. Yeah.
Right. Yep.
Yeah, it's in their interest. It's not in their interest to say, and it's a good way of saying, well, HCI, it's a bit risky, isn't it? You're betting your business. You run your business on SAP. That is something that I think is it's still out there, or it's less than it used to be, but I still see it from time to time.
Yeah, to your point, if they're validating it on an extracted hardware, who cares what it runs on? If the performance is there and it's doing what you need to do, then it should be good to go.
And Brent weighed in that they have HANA running on HCI. So I think, this is another opportunity to even counter the FUD that's out there, Simon. The user group can come in and offer this forum where customers can talk to other customers and find out that, hey, is this happening? And, Brent can weigh in and say, yeah, we're doing this. So it takes the vendor or the OEM out of the equation, and it's, and user to user type thing, customer to customer.
But I think also I'm pretty sure, because Dell has sort of validated designs for this as well. So it's not like you're going in first of a kind on your own.
Right.
There's a lot of work Dell have done with SAP for validated designs, configuration best practices, and so on. So it's not a journey you go on your own. You've got, we work with Dell all the time, because technology changes and evolves, and the reference architectures both from Dell and VMware as well. They're an important part of the toolkit, because if you're using the validated architectures, often you've got things like a smoother upgrade path in future and so on. So look at those, use them. I understand sometimes there is that reluctance, but to be honest, we do it. We don't have a problem. I think bigger challenges are sometimes things like packages like Epic, where they run testing before they're live, where they almost test IO systems to destruction. So you have to be very wary about coexistence on multi-tenants, and maybe test stuff with Epic on a single tenant, which means that you use different types of nodes with external storage, so each customer has their own storage. But look at the rules. Dell are a source of great advice for stuff like that as well. And although we've got a lot of experience, it doesn't stop us talking to Dell super regularly to validate what we do, just to do some checks and balances. So yeah, that cooperation and collaboration is imperative.
Yeah, fantastic. Talk a little bit about multi-cloud, guys. So, Adam, unfortunately, you weren't at DTW, and I don't think, Simon, you made it across the pond for this one.
Afraid not. No, they made me work, David.
Okay.
Unfortunately, I had customers to see rather than come and enjoy myself at the Dell Tech World. So, hopefully in the future.
Next year will be twice the size we were this year. We'll get back to the way we were, but it's totally understandable. What we did talk about, though, is, Chuck talked about multi-cloud by design versus the current state of multi-cloud by default. And Simon, I think this weighs into a little bit of what you were talking about. If you're going to build a house, you want to know what you're building before you lay the foundation down.
Yeah.
That said, feels like people are putting up tents all over the place, and now they're realizing they need a house. So how are you helping customers with that multi-cloud migration from maybe, this is your current state and you got here by default, but where this is where you should be, and here's how we can get you there?
I'll answer that in two ways. We have some customers that do what I always call mode 1 migrations, where they've just taken VMs and plonked them on the cloud, mostly to avoid doing a hardware refresh. It wasn't done by design. It was done because someone wants to move from a CapEx to an OpEx world, and they've just moved to cloud. And some of those come and talk to us about moving it back to a private cloud solution because it hasn't worked very well, or they've had a very big bill. So we get some of that. Then we get people who've gone in a bit more informed and maybe done a mode 1 migration, but their aim is to replace half of what they've migrated with new applications, be it SaaS, be it locally developed applications, but they need low latency interconnectivity between old and new world. And therefore you still need, say, VMware in the cloud to run the old stuff, because that's easy to do and lift and shift. But I'm going to replace my retail front end with something I've built on Amazon or Microsoft collaboration suite, or I need to do my analytics, and I don't really know, I quite like Google BigQuery, for example. But the reason you go back to my foundations analogy is you've got to design all that. Otherwise you get hit by things like egress charges, you get hit by consumption charges, you get hit by the fact that you're moving data between clouds and you don't know where your master of the data is and things like that. So that whole design piece around what you're going to do and pre-planning it is essential, whatever you do. And also, if you know you're going to do it, truly understand the costs. The number of customers that say don't put cost control on their IT shop, and a developer wants to test something and spins up, 1,000 cores for 24 hours testing something, and all of a sudden the CFO gets a whacking great bill because it's uncontrolled. There's countless stories of that happening, and it still happens today. We try and help customers with our optimizer products, which essentially run cloud health with a service on top, to really look at what customers do to right size what they've done. Because just moving it, often if you look at your own infrastructure, it's all sized for peak. If you move it to the cloud, you've got that available to you, but actually you want to size it for day-to-day operations and only burst for peak. So there's a lot of different tricks to how you utilize infrastructure when you're in the cloud, because it's the resource is more elastic than if you're in your own data center. But many people forget that when they do it, because often the projects get pressurized for time, and actually success is just completing the migration. It's not optimizing a completed migration. That's a second step. And bill shock is often the cause of doing that. That's a little different way of answering it, but it just may give you a few flavors of things that certainly we talk to customers to think about.
Yeah, thank you. I think, having watched this for a while now, there's and Adam, you mentioned it earlier, we must be in the cloud, we must be in the cloud, and everyone runs to the cloud. And then it's like, hey, wait a minute, with this recurring bill that I get no economies of scale on, I could buy an awful lot of infrastructure for my own data center. Now it's the repatriation and it's the right sizing. Simon, you talk about, all of this stuff that you can do in the cloud. You don't have to build for capacity. You can build for day-to-day operations and burst. More and more of what we're seeing now is you can still do that. If you have a right designed multi-cloud setup, you can do that leveraging your on-prem or your wholly owned private cloud infrastructure, where you do get economies of scale, and then leverage that burst.
Yeah, yes, you can, absolutely. And one of the things we do with our private cloud solutions is we provide things like DR for customers that run VMware on Dell. They can do DR on our private cloud and pay for the compute by the hour. You could also do that with your own Dell solution in your data center and burst your DR to public cloud. There are different options. There's different constraints in terms of what you do, because what we do is try and give the customer the near native VMware and Dell experience, that where you can peer inside the box and look at the metrics and the stats. If you're doing that, say with VMware on the cloud, for example, you lose some of that granularity and visibility. So some of it has to be taken on trust. You also have different functionality depending on whose VMware, for example, you run in the public cloud. Each of the hyperscalers implementation is slightly different. So you get that there's compromises to be made at each stage, and different providers offer the compromise in a different space. And again, if you know what compromise you're making, you know where you're managing risk or you're letting someone else manage risk on your behalf. And I think that's quite a cultural change, because engineers often don't like letting go. So you need to educate, work with them, test and trial, proof of concept, bits and pieces like that in whatever you're doing, really to convince the doubters is the wrong word, but to demonstrate capability is the way I like to describe it.
Gentlemen, we are approaching quarter till the hour, wherever anybody is. I think there might be 1 half-hour time zone where we're not at quarter of the hour, we're at quarter past the hour, but we'll leave that for the trivia to see if anybody knows where that is.
India.
Is it India?
There's some India time zones that are half an hour out of sync.
I was thinking of St. John's, Canada, but I'm sure we'll get some more in the chat here as we wrap up. I really enjoyed this conversation. Simon, thank you for coming on. It's great to hear what you're doing there, how you're helping customers on the multi-cloud journey, and how you're doing it with VCF on VxRail and other, pan Dell technologies. That's fantastic. Adam, thanks for being the co-host with me. Really appreciate all you do and the beer you provide. Making the world a better place, and keep that up. That's wonderful stuff that New Belgium is doing. Folks attending, thank you very much for sharing the time with us. We got to a lot of questions in the chat. If we didn't answer your question, please shoot us to member services at convergeusergroup.com, and we'll connect you with we'll either answer it or we'll connect you with someone who can. We will be back at another community hour, same time, same bat channel. We have a survey in the chat, I believe. Yep, there's the Survey Monkey. Thank you very much. So please use that to provide feedback for us. Again, thank you sponsors, Dell Technologies, VMware, and Intel for making this possible. We have all sorts of great things in mind coming forward. If you're going to be at San Francisco for VMware Explore, it's tough for me to
Nice.
say.
Yeah.
We'll look for the Converged User Group meeting there, as well as VMware Explore Barcelona in November. And if you're around, reach out. Yeah, Rodney, I struggle with the name change too.
Yeah.
Thank you, folks. Enjoy your summer. Enjoy, I think we're, 2 days in officially to summer now. So if you're in the Northern Hemisphere, 2 days into summer, please enjoy, be well. Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Simon, Jenny. I know you're out there. Thanks for producing this. And thank you, everybody, for attending. We'll see you again soon.
No problem. Thanks all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.